I declare my interest as in the register. This massive proposal, very imaginative and exciting in many ways, is being rushed through Parliament, partly because the departing Prime Minister has a desire for a legacy, and partly because of the claimed emergency over climate change, global warming. Now, I'm actually in the minority who's rather sympathetic to the Prime Minister on many things, but not on this issue. On the latter issue of warming, we have certainly experienced a mild warming cycle for some 140 years, with carbon emissions playing a significant role in that. I've never questioned that. But, and I listened carefully to Lord Turner, I cannot find any sudden acceleration. The past 20 years, according to the Met Office figures, show a rise in 20 years of 0.3%, in line broadly with the whole cycle, slightly slower than the further warming in the last quarter of the 20th century. So of concern, but not, I can detect, a sudden emergency. Now, the excitement occurring now may arise from the forecasts by models of a boiling planet later this century. Now, that may happen, anything may happen, and I understand people who want to take insurance. But so far, there's no observational scientific evidence for it. And nearly all of those models, and there are over 100 of them, have been deeply inaccurate so far, seriously biased towards overheating, sometimes by up to 300%. Interestingly, only the Russian model has been accurate for this century, so they should be treated with care. On costs, there's been much discussion about costs, and quite rightly so. The Climate Change Committee's prediction of a likely net of benefits cost of 50 billion per annum by 2050 may be optimistic. Other outside estimates reject it, and certainly the Department of Business and Energy puts the cost 40% higher at 70 billion per annum, as was quoted by the Chancellor in his letter to the Prime Minister. All seem to agree that total expenditure by 2050 will be over £1 trillion. Now, that seems to me to be testing. And the figures of the committee seem to omit carbon taxes and renewable subsidies amounting to around £1 trillion, and the decarbonising of heat by refurbishing all houses. And I should point out that was quoted from a respectable sectoral energy institute, and that is why it was quoted. The total financial liability falling on consumers and taxpayers is, I find, very complex to account, but likely to be huge, and perhaps larger, equally perhaps smaller, we don't know, than the Climate Committee admits. Now, this revolutionary programme is, as an infrastructure project, greater than any on public expenditure this country has done since committing to fight the Second World War, and it inevitably involves massive disruption to our existing economy. There will certainly be benefits, I accept that, but it creates a new and potentially more expensive energy base. By raising costs, worsens our export competitiveness, probably closing or exporting our existing high energy consuming industries, steel, engineering, cement, etc. and if so, hitting jobs and living standards. My Lords, the idea of a cleaner environment is commendable, and I've always supported it. But these are huge costs. We have to ask, as the Chancellor did in his letter to the Prime Minister, which areas of public expenditure may have to suffer and suffer costs to pay for it. Health, social care, schools, defence, they may be cut to shoulder that burden, and my Labour colleagues in particular may wish to consider that. Will it be, as is the case with the 15 billion of current climate costs, that the working people of this country will carry the main burden relative to their incomes through paying significantly higher energy costs and green taxes to subsidise renewables? And I note the committee seems to appreciate that problem, and I'll be interested in what the government's response to it is. My Lords, the climate change revolution is predominantly a professional class religion where the main cost is paid for by working people who often don't share the faith. The noble Lord Deben claimed that most people are on his side. There is no evidence for that. Polls have long shown that working people do not massively support this project, and they have not yet heard of these new proposed burdens. My Lords, whatever your feelings about decarbonisation, and I sense that most people probably like the general idea because they rightly, like me, dislike pollution and want a better environment, you must surely agree that it's irresponsible of the government to push through this massive and not fully considered project as a statutory instrument without serious assessment of the practicality of its proposed details or assessment of its costs and where the costs will fall. Surely, with such a massive project, we can wait until the Treasury, or perhaps I would like to see, an independent inquiry chaired by the Treasury, followed by full parliamentary scrutiny, reports to us. This project must be properly handled by government, positively, with concern for our future environment, but also with responsible concern for technological and financial practicalities and the livelihoods of our working people. My final and even more worrying point is about the cavalier way in which this costly adventure has been launched, in that it's being proposed on a single nation basis. Not that that's its ideal, but the UK is apparently to be prepared to do this with no guarantees of the global environmental benefits, offering virtue signalling moral leadership to the whole world. My Lords, that is dangerous. Our share of global emissions is just over 1%. If we decarbonise tomorrow alone, that is the amount by which global carbon emissions would diminish, just over 1%. Yet in the next few years, China and India alone, the great carbon emitters, will increase their carbon emissions by more than double that. So our contribution will be swamped. Carbon emissions will still rise, and at what economic cost to the working people of this country? My Lords, pursuing zero carbon in Britain alone, while the big emitters continue polluting the atmosphere on a massive scale, is a futile gesture of moral imperialism. No doubt the virtue signallers have good intentions. I've never questioned that. But as an earlier politician wisely said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We should mobilise the present environmental energy to encourage the great economies of the world to look seriously at the scientific facts about climate change, not at the alarmist propaganda, and then, in a measured way, in conjunction with the observational evidence, move towards a way and a time when carbon emissions are more limited. But that world discipline and its benefits must be guaranteed and not according to some delusional hopes. No false paper promises based on ill-supported forecasts like the Paris Agreement. Until then, our government must take its national duties responsibly, scrutinise any climate adventure with care, checking the observational facts of the science, allowing into the process sensible sceptics asking questions, as was traditionally done under Enlightenment science, not behaving, as the BBC now sadly does, like a Stalinist censor, excluding any informed sceptic who questions wilder climate fantasies. And I say to the BBC that the working people won't have much extra revenue to buy their licences if all these proposals go through. Above all, the government must scrutinise properly. We may eventually wish to enter this revolution, but we must first agree on whether it will pragmatically achieve its shared purpose and what it will cost and who will pay for it.
Lords,